I think it would be a good idea if you had the review sheet that I gave you in class today handy. I'll also put a copy of that on my website in case you you either weren't in class or forgot your review sheet at home. But I'm gonna try to keep this brief and just kind of give you an overview of things that you should be reviewing for the test on Thursday. Just a reminder, we're talking about a test on Unit 7, which is the Civil War and Reconstruction, so chapters 11 and 12. Remember, we didn't read all the sections in chapter 11, but we did read all 3 sections in chapter 12, so make sure that you're looking at your textbook reading notes. The format of the test is there's not going to be any multiple choice on this test. It's going to be primarily medium and short answers, short and medium answer questions. I am going to give you a couple of the political cartoons from the NAST collection that we looked at in class for you to answer some questions about, and also looking at one of the election maps that we'll take a look at in this review. If you just kind of follow along with me on the review sheet, I can actually, as you're looking at the review sheet, I'll just kind of quickly go through a couple of these things just to give you an idea of what you should be reviewing. When it comes to the Civil War, the first item I have on here is called the Tale of the Tape, but really all I'm talking about there is the relative advantages and disadvantages. So those things like resources and population numbers and food and weapons and strategy and how do you win. We went through those in pretty great detail, and so I will be asking you questions on the test about that and what it meant. So not only what the advantages were, but also what it meant, or what the strategies were, and how that created an advantage or a disadvantage. The next section is this is a section on the test, the idea of turning points in the Civil War. And so what I recommend that you review is specifically the significant turning points that we talked about, which would be in the East, Gettysburg; in the West, and this is the 1863, in the West, Vicksburg, the Emancipation Proclamation as a turning point, and then ultimately, we get those last turning points at the end where you get Grant versus Lee in the East and Sherman's March of Total Warfare in the West. What you want to be able to do there is you want to be able to talk about what was either happening before that needed a turning point, or what the problems were. So what we then have as the turning point, and if it's a turning point, what happens after to either improve or make the situation tougher. And then we go into Reconstruction. You have a video on Lincoln's 10% plan, which you can review if you want to. Remember that Lincoln's plan does not go into action because he's assassinated before Reconstruction could really start. But the combination of Lincoln's plan, the 10% plan, the Wade-Davis bill, the pocket veto, congressional recess, and the assassination, all those things go together to explain why Andrew Johnson's in a position to be in charge of Reconstruction. So being able to put that all together in terms of the timeline of, basically July of 1864 through April of 1865, where we have Lincoln talking about a 10% plan, the radicals not liking that, passing the Wade-Davis bill, allowing the pocket veto to happen, and then adjourning, and then them adjourning, and what that means for 1865 when Lincoln's not going to be around. Like I told you, there will be NAST cartoons on the test. I will pick 2 or 3 of them, and I will ask you questions about them, so you might want to review the notes that you took. And after I finish this video, I will also post the PowerPoint with those cartoons in case you want to go back and look at any of them. Okay, so that'll be under, this video will be where the videos normally are, and then right underneath it I'll put a link to I'll just call it NAST cartoons. Presidential Reconstruction we talked about quite a bit in class today. That would be the what I'm looking for. Oh, here, I could just go to this here. Look. That would be this outer circle. What does presidential Reconstruction look like? Why does it look like that? What were Johnson's mistakes? How did the timeline come in? Be prepared to talk, maybe write about his plan versus carrying it out, and how it leads to these realities. And then we have the checklist, right? The checklist. And then we have Reconstruction and transition, which is simply what's happening between presidential Reconstruction and radical Reconstruction as the Congress is back, but they don't have enough power to quite take over yet. And then finally, congressional Reconstruction. And that's the idea of those military zones, putting the military back in, the passing Reconstruction Acts, these three groups, carpetbaggers, freedmen, and scalawags. The process of impeachment is something that we really didn't talk that much about, but it's important for you to know. So I would review that in your textbook. And then the one thing I'm going to review here in this PowerPoint is the election of 1876. So as I look at some of these, this is radical Reconstruction. This is an example of carpetbaggers. The South is having to carry the Union soldiers, and then the Northerner who's benefiting from it. Here's one cartoon that we didn't get to in the NAS cartoons, and this is to be emblematic of that post that post-radical period. Because if you look at this map, what I would zoom in on for you is the years here, and you notice that the first year is the date that they come back into the Union, and then the second date is where the Democrats, the white Southerners, redeemed the South. And that redemption is important because that next date is when white Southerners are back in control. And by about 1874, if you look through this map, by about 1874, it is a situation in the South that is very different. So think about this family, right, compared with the family from the big first NAST cartoon. It's a very different image. Intimidation, voting, going to the polls, intimidation, looks proud, very, very different posture. Remember our guy in front of the cashier, very different posture. He has his ballot in his hand. He seems proud and upright, but this is tough to contend with. Okay, here's what I want to focus in on. Here's Grant's second election, and here you see the blue is Republicans, and in the next map, Republicans will be red. But you see, if I go back to this map, by 1872, the Republicans are still in control of a lot of the South because the military is still there, and that's why we see the blue still here. These states have yet to be redeemed. So, for example, if you look at North Carolina, they are starting the process of redemption. They're starting to getting back into power, but not fully enough in power yet that they can take over the state. Here is the election of 1876, and what I would challenge you to think about in review is how does this map get us to an end to Reconstruction? Because when you look at this, who won? Who wins this election? It's very close. And you can see that the Republicans are going to win, but it's only through a deal. And this map demonstrates to us that the Democrats are back in the South. The only holdouts, you see those three states, and if I were to come back here, you'll see 1877, and just coming in 1876, right? With redemption, those states will be back also. So what we can see in 1876 here is that the Republicans are losing their control in the South and even in some northern states. So if I go back to this, this idea of opportunity, I think in third period I may have called it compromise, but either way, the Democratic Party seeing its opportunity to come back to power nationally is starting to be realized. And what they were willing to do, the Democrats were willing to do, and this is kind of the key, what they were willing to do is they were willing to trade the election results in 1876. Tilden should have won, the Democrat. Tilden should have won. They give the Republicans the White House in exchange for an end to the military occupation of the South. And that's significant. And so as we review this in class tomorrow, I'd like you to come in with questions that maybe you have to clarify some of these things. But this sheet should give you plenty to go off of for the test on Thursday.